That night at the upscale club, my parents raised their glasses and burst into laughter when I showed them my first painting on my phone. This would look better hanging in the garage. I smiled, closed the phone. The next morning, an anonymous collector asked just one question. Would you dare put your work up for auction at the major event this Friday? I transformed shame into strategy. And the moment the gavel struck at $250,000, I stepped into the spotlight, lifted my head, spoke exactly 3 sentences that silenced the room, then turned my back and never looked back again. My name is Avery Lane, and I've spent 29 years learning the precise weight of disappointment served on bone china. The Highfield Country Club gleamed like a jewelry box that December evening, crystal chandeliers casting geometric shadows across the mahogany panels. My parents' company, Lane Heritage Homes, had booked the entire West Wing for their 15th anniversary celebration. The smell of truffle oil and aged bourbon mingled with my mother Carol's signature Chanel No. 5 creating an atmosphere so thick with privilege I could barely breathe. Avery, darling, stop lurking by the oyster bar. My mother's voice cut through the jazz quartet's rendition of Something Forgettable. The Whitmans are dying to hear about your little art project. Little art project. I pressed my phone against my thigh, the screen still warm from where I'd been reviewing my latest sketch between refills at the coffee shop where I actually made my living. Dennis, my father, stood beside her in his navy Tom Ford suit, the one he wore to every closing that exceeded $2 million. His smile had that practiced quality, the same one from the Lane Heritage Homes billboards scattered across Riverside Heights. "Show them, sweetheart," Carol insisted, her manicured fingers already reaching for my phone. "She's been dabbling again. You know how creative types are." The Whitmans leaned in with the kind of polite interest reserved for other people's vacation slides. I unlocked my phone, pulled up the image, a mixed media piece I'd been developing for 3 months, layers of charcoal, and found materials creating what my old friend Ethan Ward from North Star Gallery Group had called viscerally authentic. Carol snatched the phone before I could properly angle the screen. "Oh my," she laughed, that tinkling sound that preceded every public execution of my ambitions. "Dennis, look at this. Our daughter thinks torn receipts and coffee stains are art now." The phone passed from hand to hand like evidence at a trial. Each viewer's expression shifted from anticipation to confusion to barely suppressed amusement. Someone's champagne flute clinked against their wedding ring, a sharp note that seemed to punctuate each dismissive glance. "You know what this reminds me of?" Dennis took the phone, holding it at arm's length as if the image might contaminate his cufflinks. "That modern art exhibit where someone left their glasses on the floor and people thought it was an installation?" The room erupted in knowing laughter. "Honestly, Avery, this would look better hanging in the garage. At least there it might catch some oil drips, make itself useful." My smile remained steady, automatic. 29 years of practice had taught me exactly how to arrange my face during these moments. But this time, something shifted. My finger found the voice memo app, tapping record just as Carol launched into her finale. This is exactly why we've been encouraging Avery to take that position in our acquisitions department," she announced to the circle, her voice carrying that false concern mother's perfect over decades. "Some people need structure, routine, all this creative wandering. It's just, well, it's time to stop the delusions, isn't it? We've arranged for her to start Monday morning, 8:30 sharp." The Whitmans nodded sagely. Someone patted my shoulder with the kind of sympathy reserved for reformed addicts. The chandelier light caught the Cartier watches and diamond tennis bracelets, creating small explosions of brilliance that hurt to look at directly. "To family." Dennis raised his glass, pulling me into a side embrace that felt more like restraint than affection. "And to knowing when it's time to grow up." The toast echoed through the room. Glasses chimed against each other in a symphony of agreement. I raised my water glass. I'd stopped drinking at family events years ago, kneading my wits sharp as surgical instruments and let it touch my lips without swallowing. The jazz quartet resumed. something upbeat that made the older couples sway. Carol had already moved on to discussing the new development in Westbrook, her hands animated as she described the revolutionary open floor plans that were identical to every other Lane Heritage property. Dennis worked the room like a senator, all firm handshakes and strategic compliments. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, the recording still running, capturing the ambient cruelty of clinking silverware and casual dismissal. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the valet stand, my beat-up Honda Civic hidden somewhere behind the parade of Mercedes and Teslas. Avery. Ethan Ward appeared at my elbow, his presence unexpected enough to crack my composure for a moment. Didn't expect to see you here. My parents are predictable. Every December 15th, like clockwork. I kept my voice low, watching Carol's radar sweep the room. What brings you to purgatory? North Star has some donors here. Part of the job. He glanced at my phone. That the new piece, the one headed for the garage, apparently? His expression darkened. You're kidding. That piece is... He stopped himself, noticing the proximity of eager ears. We should talk. Soon. I nodded, watching him disappear back into the crowd just as Carol's voice rose again, telling someone about her artist daughter with the same tone she used to describe her brief unfortunate phase with rescue dogs. The rest of the evening blurred into a familiar pattern of deflection and endurance, but in my clutch, my phone continued recording, preserving every laugh, every dismissive comment, every moment that would later become evidence of something larger than just family disappointment. By 11:15, when the valet finally brought my car around, I had 43 minutes of audio and a text from Ethan. They're trying to sabotage you. We need to talk about what I've been hearing. I drove away from the Highfield Country Club with its perfect facades and manicured hedges, toward my studio apartment where real work waited. In the rearview mirror, the building glowed like a false promise, beautiful and cold. The garage comment would become prophecy, just not in the way Dennis intended. The truth about my family emerged in fragments, like archaeological evidence of a crime. 3 days after the country club disaster, I sat across from Ethan at a diner on the outskirts of Riverside Heights, the kind of place where Lane Heritage homes would never develop. He pushed a folder across the cracked Formica table. Remember that Brennan Gallery internship you applied for 2 years ago? His coffee sat untouched, growing cold. The one you never heard back from, I remembered. 6 months of portfolio preparation, 3 recommendation letters, and silence so complete I'd assumed rejection. They received a response from your email address. He opened the folder, revealing a printed email dated March 12th, 2 years prior. It says, after careful consideration with my family, I've decided I'm not ready for this level of commitment. Please withdraw my application. The words blurred. My signature appeared at the bottom, not typed, but the actual image of my signature that Carol had access to through the family business accounts. The sender address, Avery, Lanny Lane Heritage Homes. Com. The account my parents insisted I use for professional correspondence. There's more. Ethan pulled out another sheet. The East Side Artist Residency, the Mercer Foundation grant, all withdrawn or declined from that same email address. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. Each one a door closed, a bridge burned, an opportunity strangled before it could breathe. The coffee shop where I worked, where I'd been working for 3 years because nothing else came through, suddenly felt less like bad luck and more like orchestrated failure. How did you... My assistant used to work at Brennan. She mentioned your withdrawal when I brought up your work. Said it was strange because the curator had been excited about your portfolio. He leaned back. That's when I started digging. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a greenish pallor that matched my nausea. A couple in the next booth argued about credit card debt, their voices a low soundtrack to my unraveling. It gets worse. Ethan's voice dropped. There's been talk in the galleries, among collectors, that you're unstable, that your family has to manage your career because of emotional issues. Who's spreading? But I already knew. PR releases from Lane Heritage Homes always include a bio about Dennis and Carol. For the past 18 months, there's been a line about supporting their daughter through her artistic journey while she addresses personal challenges. Subtle enough to seem supportive, damaging enough to explain why you're not getting anywhere. I thought about my college fund, the $40,000 that had mysteriously vanished when Cousin Kyle needed startup money for his gym. A temporary loan, my parents had said. We'll work something out. Kyle's gym folded in 8 months. The loan was never mentioned again. I'd been paying off student debt for 7 years. Can I see the PR releases? He handed me his phone. There it was, buried in paragraph 4 of a press release about their latest suburban development. The Lanes remain committed to family values, supporting their daughter Avery through her artistic explorations as she works through personal challenges with their full support. Personal challenges. Code for unstable, untrustworthy, unworthy. There's one more thing. Ethan hesitated. Your position at Lane Heritage Homes, the one they announced at the party. The acquisitions department, starting Monday. I looked into it. You'd be listed as a creative consultant, but the actual role it's data entry with a non-compete clause that would prevent you from selling art professionally for 5 years after leaving the company. The contract language is comprehensive. The diner seemed to tilt. Through the window, I watched normal people living normal lives, unaware that some families built prisons out of love and called them homes. I need copies of everything. Already done. He pushed the folder toward me. There's also this. A business card slid across the table. Paula Griggs, Employment Law and Contract Disputes. She specializes in family business situations, quiet, effective, and very familiar with parental overreach disguised as support. I picked up the card, its edges sharp against my fingertips. They'll deny everything. Say I'm overreacting. Ungrateful. Maybe, but you have the emails, the PR releases, the pattern. Ethan finally took a sip of his cold coffee, grimacing. And you have that recording from the party, right? I nodded. 43 minutes of casual cruelty. Now evidence. One more question, I said. That email address, the Lane Heritage one. Who has access? I had my tech friend look into it. The account has 3 authorized users, you, Carol, and someone listed as PR admin. The withdrawal emails were sent from IP addresses registered to Lane Heritage Homes' main office. My phone buzzed. A text from Carol. Reminder Monday, 8:30 sharp. Wear something professional. We've arranged everything with HR. So proud of you for finally being sensible mom. I screenshot the message, adding it to my growing archive. What are you going to do? Ethan asked. Outside, rain had started falling, turning the parking lot into a mirror of neon and shadow. I thought about every scholarship I didn't get, every opportunity that mysteriously disappeared, every whisper about my challenges that followed me through the art world like a poison cloud. I'm going to paint, I said, and then I'm going to hang it somewhere better than their garage. Ethan smiled for the first time that afternoon. Mara Ellison at North Star. She's been asking about you. Wants to see your work. The real work. No family connection, no backstory. Just the art. I took the folder, feeling its weight years of theft disguised as protection, sabotage wrapped in concern. The couple in the next booth had stopped arguing, now sitting in silence over empty plates. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Thank you, I told Ethan, for believing something was wrong. I believed something was right, he corrected. Your work. It deserves to be seen without your family's editorial notes. As I left the diner, folder clutched against my chest, I felt something shift. The story they'd been telling about me fragile, unstable, needing management was about to meet a different narrative. One where the protagonist stops accepting the role she's been assigned and starts writing her own script. My Honda struggled to start in the rain, coughing twice before turning over. But it ran, despite everything. Like me, Monday was 4 days away. Plenty of time to prepare for a different kind of debut. The IT department at Lane Heritage Homes occupied a windowless corner of the third floor, fluorescent tubes flickering like a nervous pulse. I arrived at 2:15 on Friday afternoon, knowing most executives would be at the quarterly planning lunch. Email logs. Marcus, the IT supervisor, barely looked up from his 3 monitors. "You'll need authorization from Carol or Dennis." "I have it." I placed the form on his desk. Carol's signature perfectly replicated from years of signing family documents on her behalf. "Company policy allows any registered employee to request their own communication records. Section 4, subsection 12 of the Employee Handbook." He squinted at the paperwork, then at me. "You sure about this family business and all?" "Especially because it's family business." 20 minutes later, I had 2 years of email logs from Avery, Lane Heritage Homes, burned onto a USB drive. The walk to my car felt like crossing a minefield, but no one stopped me. No one even noticed. That evening, I sat on my studio floor surrounded by printouts, a forensic accountant of my own destruction. Each timestamp told a story, emails sent while I was working shifts at the coffee shop, responses crafted during times I was in class, applications withdrawn when I was asleep. The most damaging came from Carol's personal login at 3:47 p.m. On a Tuesday, a response to the Metropolitan Arts Foundation stating that I was exploring other directions and would appreciate no further contact regarding grant opportunities. My phone rang. Carol. I let it ring twice, then activated the recording app before answering. "Avery, sweetheart, Marcus mentioned you stopped by the office today." "I needed some old tax documents." I lied smoothly. "For my student loan refinancing." "Oh." A pause. "You know, you could have asked me. I have access to everything." "I know you do." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. "Are you still planning to start Monday? HR has everything prepared." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." I kept my voice neutral, channeling her own tactical sweetness. "The creative consultant position, I'd like to see the full contract before I commit." "Commit." Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Darling, it's not a commitment. It's an opportunity. Your father and I have worked very hard to create this role for you." "I understand. I'd still like to review the terms, particularly the non-compete clause." The pause was longer this time. When she spoke, the sweetness had evaporated. "Who have you been talking to? Does it matter?" "Avery, we're trying to help you. You're 29 years old, living in that terrible apartment, working at a coffee shop. It's embarrassing for all of us." "Embarrassing like having your daughter's art career succeed without your control?" "What are you talking about?" I pulled up the email to Brennan Gallery. March 12th, 2 years ago, 4:32 p.m., an email declining their internship offer, sent from the office IP address while I was working a lunch shift with 17 witnesses. "I don't know what you think you've found." I found everything. Mom, every rejection, every withdrawal, every thanks but no thanks sent on my behalf. 2 years of systematic sabotage. Sabotage. Her voice pitched higher. "We were protecting you. Do you have any idea what would happen if you failed publicly? What it would do to our reputation? Your reputation. The family reputation. Lane Heritage Homes is built on success, on stability. We couldn't have you struggling publicly, begging for grants, failing at exhibitions. We were saving you from humiliation. You were saving yourselves from having a daughter who didn't fit your marketing materials. This is exactly the kind of emotional instability I've been telling people about. The PR releases. I've seen those too." Dead air. Then, quietly, "You don't understand how the world works. I understand that you stole $40,000 from my college fund for Kyle's gym. That was a family investment. That failed, like you expected me to fail. Except you didn't wait to find out you guaranteed it. Everything we've done has been for your own good. Someday you'll understand that. Monday, 8:30. Don't be late." She hung up. I sat in the silence of my studio, surrounded by evidence of a crime that wasn't technically illegal, just devastating. The USB drive sat on my desk like a loaded weapon. But I needed more than emails. I needed strategy. Paula Griggs answered on the first ring. Ethan Ward said you'd be calling. Can you come by tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? Yes. Bring everything, every email, every document, every recording. And Miss Lane, start documenting any assets you have independently, bank accounts, artwork, anything in your name alone. Your parents sound like the type who know how to use financial leverage. After the call, I stood in front of my easel, where a new canvas waited. The piece that would become Appraisal's No. One was taking shape layers of student loan statements, fragments of the forged emails, pieces of rejection letters I'd never actually sent, all building into something that looked like a portrait but felt like an autopsy. My phone buzzed. Dennis this time, his text formal as a contract. Your mother informed me of your conversation. This rebellious phase needs to end. Monday's position is non-negotiable if you wish to maintain any relationship with this family. I screenshot it, adding to my collection. Then I picked up my brush and began to paint over the collaged documents, each stroke an act of transformation. Evidence became art. Betrayal became texture. The pain they'd so carefully documented in their PR releases, the personal challenges they'd invented, became the foundation for something they couldn't control, couldn't manage, couldn't withdraw. Outside my window, Riverside Heights glittered with Friday night possibility. Somewhere across town, my parents were probably at their wine club, explaining my difficulties to sympathetic friends, building their narrative of the troubled daughter they supported so generously. They had no idea that their careful construction was about to meet my reconstruction, that every document they'd used to build my prison would become a brick in my escape route. Monday was coming, but it wouldn't be the Monday they expected. I painted until 3 a.m, until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned, until the canvas held not just an image but an indictment. When I finally stepped back, what stared back at me was truth dressed in defiance. The garage, Dennis had said, where things go to be forgotten, to be stored, to be dismissed. But garages were also where people built things, fixed things, where tools waited to dismantle and rebuild. I smiled, remembering something Ethan had said, your work deserves to be seen without your family's editorial notes. Soon, everyone would see, not just the work, but the workshop, the whole brutal, beautiful process of breaking free. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, matching the industrial aesthetic of my workspace. I'd been painting for 16 hours straight, fueled by instant coffee and the kind of rage that burns clean. The Appraisals series sprawled across my studio floor, 5 canvases in various stages of completion, each one layered with the detritus of family betrayal. Shredded student loan statements formed texture beneath oil paint. Fragments of forged emails became shadow and light. Receipts from the coffee shop where I'd worked while they told people I was addressing challenges created a pointillistic effect that hurt to look at directly. At 11 that morning, Mara Ellison from North Star Gallery stood in my doorway, her expression unreadable. Ethan said you had new work. He didn't say it was evidence of a crime scene. She moved through the space like a detective, crouching near each canvas, photographing details with her phone. Her silence stretched for 10 minutes while I stood frozen, paint still under my fingernails. This one. She pointed to the largest piece, where my self-portrait emerged from a collage of legal documents, my face fractured by the watermarks of Lane Heritage Homes letterhead. This is the one. For what? The Hawthorne Art Fair. 3 weeks from now. Major collectors. Serious money. And, she smiled like a shark scenting blood, your parents' company is a silver-tier sponsor. My stomach twisted. They'll be there. Is that a problem? I thought about Monday's looming deadline, the non-compete clause, the creative consultant prison they'd constructed. No, it's perfect. Good. Enter it under your initials only. A, L, keep some mystery. She pulled out her tablet. The reserve price. No reserve. Her eyebrows shot up. That's risky. The market will decide what truth is worth. She studied me for a long moment. You know what you're doing. This isn't just about selling art anymore. It never was. They made sure of that. After Mara left, I met Paula Griggs at her office, a converted brownstone that smelled of leather and legal precedent. She reviewed my evidence with the methodical precision of a surgeon. The forged emails are clear fraud, but proving damages in family situations is complex. However, she tapped the non-compete clause. This is unconscionable. 5 years for a data entry position. No court would uphold this. So I can refuse to sign. You can do better than that. She pulled out a legal pad, sketching a timeline. We prepare a cease and desist regarding the identity fraud and defamation. But we don't send it yet. We wait for a public moment. Maximum impact. The Hawthorne Fair? Exactly. Your painting sells hopefully well, establishing your professional credibility. Then we strike. The contrast between their narrative of you being unstable and the reality of your success becomes undeniable. What if it doesn't sell? Paula's smile was razor sharp. Then we go with Plan B, a very public lawsuit about the stolen college funds and forged communications, but something tells me we won't need that. I spent the next 2 weeks in isolation, finishing the appraisals series while dodging increasingly aggressive texts from my parents. Carol moved from sweet manipulation to cold threats. Dennis sent formal emails about family obligations and consequences of ingratitude. I responded to none of them. Instead, I worked with Paula to draft the cease and desist, each word calibrated for maximum legal impact. We included screenshots of the forged emails, the PR releases claiming I had personal challenges, and a detailed accounting of the $40,000 that had vanished into Kyle's failed gym. This is a nuclear option, Paula warned. Once this goes public, there's no going back. There was no going back the moment they sent that first forged email. Ethan helped with the practical details, professional photography of Appraisals No. 1, the catalog entry that described the materials without revealing the full story, the strategic whisper campaign among collectors about an exciting new anonymous artist. There's been interest, he told me 3 days before the fair. Serious interest. Someone's been asking about A.L. through back channels. Who? Anonymous buyer, working through a proxy, deep pockets, from what I hear. The night before Hawthorne, I stood in my studio one last time with the painting, under the work lights. Every layer revealed itself, years of suppression transformed into something that demanded to be seen. The student loan statements formed the bone structure of my face. The forged emails created the shadows beneath my eyes, and through it all, my gaze stared back, unblinking and unashamed. My phone rang. Carol again. This time, I answered. Last chance. Avery, Monday morning, or you're cut off. No more health insurance through the company. No more emergency help. No more family. I understand. Do you? Because you're about to throw away everything for some childish rebellion. No, I said quietly. I'm about to stop letting you throw me away. You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. You'll regret this. I already have regrets. Years of them. But after tomorrow night, they'll all be yours. I hung up before she could respond. Paula had prepared sealed envelopes with the cease and desist letters, ready to be distributed at my signal. The lawsuit documentation waited in her office safe. Everything was positioned like pieces on a chessboard, waiting for the opening move. I wrapped Appraisals No. 1 carefully, each layer of protection feeling like armor. Tomorrow night, it would hang in the Hawthorne Fair, surrounded by established artists and serious collectors. My parents would walk past it in their designer clothes, completely unaware that their daughter's garage art was about to become the most expensive mirror they'd ever look into. The coffee shop had given me the weekend off. My manager, who'd watched me work doubles while my parents told everyone I was unstable, had simply said, "Go show them who you really are." As midnight approached, I stood at my window watching the city sleep. Somewhere across town, my parents were probably finalizing Monday's employment contract. confident in their control. They didn't know that I'd already signed a different kind of contract, one written in paint and pain and evidence. One that couldn't be withdrawn or forged or managed. The trap they'd built for me had become the stage for my escape, and in less than 24 hours, the curtain would rise. The Hawthorne Art Fair transformed the Riverside Convention Center into a cathedral of commerce and culture. By 7:45 that evening, the main hall hummed with the particular frequency of money-meeting art champagne flutes singing against each other, heels clicking on marble, the hushed reverence of evaluation disguised as appreciation. I stood near the coat check, watching my parents make their entrance. Lane Heritage Homes had invested enough in silver tier sponsorship to guarantee their prominence, their company logo discreetly placed on every third banner. Carol wore her Saint Laurent cocktail dress, the one she saved for occasions requiring maximum intimidation. Dennis guided her through the crowd with the proprietary confidence of someone who believed ownership was a personality trait. There in rare form, Ethan appeared beside me, handing over a glass of water designed to look like vodka tonic. Your mother just told the Hendersons that she's thrilled to support emerging artists, even when they're finding their way. She doesn't know I'm here. Your piece is listed under A.L. Remember, and Mara's kept it in the reserve collection. It won't be revealed until the auction portion at 9. I watched my parents work the room, Carol's laugh cutting through conversations like a blade wrapped in silk. They paused at each piece, performing appreciation while Dennis calculated square footage and Carol mentioned property values in the neighborhoods where the artists lived. At 8:30, more familiar faces appeared. Paula Griggs entered quietly, positioning herself near the registration desk where she could observe everything. She caught my eye, tapped her bag, the letters were ready. Then the atmosphere shifted. A woman in her 60s, wearing understated Armani and an attitude that suggested she bought art the way other people bought groceries, was speaking intensely with Mara. They kept glancing toward the reserve collection area. "That's her," Ethan whispered. "The anonymous buyer's representative, Martha Vance. She handles acquisitions for someone who never appears publicly but has pieces in MoMA and the Whitney." My phone buzzed. "Carol, where are you? This is your last chance. Don't make us look for you." I turned it to silent. At 8:55, Mara took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin our featured auction. Tonight's pieces represent some of the most exciting emerging voices in contemporary art." The crowd migrated toward the auction space, my parents securing seats in the third row close enough to be seen caring about art, far enough back to suggest they were above desperate bidding. "Our first piece," Mara announced, "is from a new artist working under the initials A.L. The work incorporates mixed media in a way that challenges our conception of portraiture and documentation." The handlers wheeled out Appraisals No Bow 1. Under the gallery lights, it looked different, more aggressive somehow. The layered documents created a topography of bureaucratic violence, my painted face emerging from the paperwork like someone drowning in forms. The Lane Heritage Homes letterhead was visible but fragmented, recognizable only if you knew what to look for. A ripple went through the crowd. I watched my mother lean forward, squinting. Dennis pulled out his glasses. "We'll start the bidding at $5,000. Immediately, a paddle rose, then another. The price climbed steadily. 10, 15, 20,000. I stood frozen, my hands gripping the water glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. At 30,000? Carol whispered something sharp to Dennis. His face had gone pale. At 50,000, the room's energy shifted from interest to event. People were recording with their phones, whispering about the anonymous artist, the audacity of the materials. At 75,000, only 2 bidders remained: Martha Vance and a young tech entrepreneur known for his controversial collection. 100,000, Martha said clearly, her voice cutting through the murmur. The room held its breath. 150,000, the entrepreneur countered. Martha smiled. 200,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carol had gone rigid, her fingers clawing at Dennis's arm. I saw her mouth form the words student loan statements as she recognized fragments in the collage. $225,000, the entrepreneur offered. Martha turned slightly, as if receiving instruction through her earpiece. Then $250,000. The gavel hovered. The entrepreneur shook his head, conceding. Going once, going twice. The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot in church. Sold for $250,000 to bidder number 47. The applause was thunder. Mara spoke into the microphone. The artist A.L. is actually present tonight. Would you like to come forward? This was it. The moment everything pivoted. I walked through the crowd, feeling it part like water. My mother's face went from confusion to recognition to horror in the span of 3 heartbeats. Dennis stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I took the microphone from Mara, my voice steady as I'd practiced. Thank you. This piece is titled Appraisals No. 1, because for years, my value has been assessed by people who had no right to that calculation. My parents were pushing through the crowd, trying to reach the stage. The materials in this work include student loan documents from when my college fund was diverted, emails forged in my name declining opportunities, and PR releases describing my personal challenges that never existed. The crowd had gone silent. Someone was definitely filming now. Art isn't what hangs in a garage. I looked directly at Dennis, frozen mid-stride. It's what survives despite being told it belongs there. Carol's voice cut through. Avery, stop this immediately. I'd also like to announce, I continued, that my attorney has just delivered cease and desist letters to Lane Heritage Homes regarding identity fraud and defamation. Copies have been provided to tonight's sponsors and media contacts. I watched Paula hand envelopes to the event coordinator, the press photographer, the society reporter from the Riverside Heights Tribune. $250,000, I said, looking at my parents' stricken faces. That's the market value of truth. Thank you for teaching me about appraisals. I finally understand my worth. I set down the microphone and walked off the stage, past my speechless parents, past the whispers and phone cameras, past everything they'd built to contain me, behind me. I heard Carol's voice rising, Dennis trying to do damage control, the crowd's excitement building into scandal. But I didn't look back. I'd learned that from them, never look back at what you're leaving in the garage. Martha Vance caught me at the exit. My client would like to commission the rest of the series. All 5 pieces. Name your price. I thought about Monday's deadline, the creative consultant position, the 5-year non-compete clause that would never touch me now. $500,000 for the series, non-negotiable. She didn't even blink. Done. We'll arrange the contracts tomorrow. As I stepped into the cold night air, my phone exploded with messages. I deleted them all unread, then called the coffee shop manager. Hey, it's Avery. I'll need to give my 2 weeks' notice. Something came up. Outside, Riverside Heights glittered with its false promises and real estate ambitions. But for the first time in my life, I owned something that couldn't be appraised, mortgaged, or managed by committee. I owned my story, and I'd just sold it for $250,000. The gavel strike at $250,000 shattered more than just the evening's expectations. It demolished 29 years of careful construction. I stood at the edge of the stage, watching the number materialize on the display board, each 0 a vindication. The auctioneer's voice seemed to slow, every syllable of sold to bidder number 47 stretching like taffy. Camera flashes exploded across my peripheral vision, turning the world into a strobe-lit dream sequence. Ladies and gentlemen, Mara's voice carried the kind of professional composure that could narrate an apocalypse. At $250,000, this represents one of the highest sales for a debut artist in Hawthorne Fair history. The room erupted. Not applause that would come later, but the specific frequency of scandal being born. Phones appeared like weapons drawn. Everyone suddenly a documentarian of disaster. I could see the headlines writing themselves in real time across their faces. Carol had pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her Saint Laurent dress now seeming like armor for the wrong war. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "That's not art. It's what?" "Mom." I found my voice, stronger than expected. "Evidence." The word hung between us like a blade. Dennis reached for Carol's arm, his real estate smile trying to reassert itself. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Like you discussed my career privately, when you sent those emails from my account." Martha Vance stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding attention. "The buyer would like to know if there are more pieces in this series." "4 more," I confirmed, keeping my eyes on my parents. Each one documenting a different aspect of appraisal. "We'll take them all," Martha announced, loud enough for the Tribune reporter to hear. $500,000 for the complete series." The gasp that went through the crowd was almost orchestral. Carol's face went from red to white so fast I thought she might faint. "You can't be serious," Dennis said to Martha. "You don't understand what this is." "I understand perfectly," Martha replied coolly. "It's a powerful commentary on familial control, financial manipulation, and the commodification of identity. The buyer recognizes important art when they see it." That's when Paula made her entrance, walking through the crowd with the measured pace of someone who bills by the hour and never rushes. She handed an envelope to Dennis with the kind of smile that suggested she enjoyed her work. "Mr. Lane, Mrs. Lane, cease and desist regarding identity fraud, defamation, and financial misconduct. We have documentation of emails sent from your corporate IP addresses using your daughter's credentials, PR releases containing false statements about her mental health, and the misappropriation of educational funds." Dennis opened the envelope, his hands visibly trembling. The camera phones swung between us like spectators at a tennis match. "Additionally," Paula continued, her voice carrying perfectly in the hushed space, "we're prepared to file for recovery of the $40,000 diverted from Miss Lane's college fund, plus interest and damages." "That was a family matter," Carol started. "Fraud is never just a family matter," Paula interrupted, "especially when it's documented, systematic, and designed to destroy someone's professional prospects." The crowd was pressing closer now, the scandal too delicious to maintain proper gallery distance. I could hear whispers rippling outward, Lane Heritage Homes, forged emails, $500,000, her own parents. Ethan appeared at my elbow with a tablet. "The sale is already trending. Anonymous artist A.L. sells debut for $250,000, exposes family fraud. The story's going viral." On the screen, I could see photos from moments ago, me at the microphone, my parents' shocked faces, the painting itself with its brutal collage of documents. The internet was already doing what it did best, turning private pain into public record. "We need to leave," Dennis said to Carol, his voice tight. "Now." But Carol wasn't ready to retreat. She turned to face the crowd, trying to reclaim the narrative. "My daughter has always been troubled. We've done everything to support her, including sabotaging every opportunity she had. Someone called out. It was the owner of the Brennan Gallery, holding up her phone. I just found the email Avery sent declining our internship. IP address traces to your corporate office." The crowd turned predatory, smelling blood in the water. These were people who traded in reputation, who understood that social capital could evaporate in seconds. Carol's composure finally cracked. "You ungrateful—" "Careful, Mrs. Lane," Paula warned. "Anything you say here can be used in civil proceedings." I pulled out my phone, bringing up the recording from the country club dinner. My finger hovered over the play button. "I have 43 minutes of audio from your anniversary party," I said quietly. But the room was so silent everyone heard. "Including your toast about stopping my delusions and forcing me into a position with a 5-year non-compete clause." Dennis grabbed Carol's arm. "We're leaving." They pushed through the crowd, their retreat recorded from a dozen angles. Someone actually applauded as they exit. Slow and mocking. Mara took the microphone again. Professional to the end. Ladies and gentlemen, let's return to celebrating the art. Congratulations to A.L. on this remarkable debut. Now the applause came, genuine and overwhelming. People surged forward, collectors wanting to meet me, reporters wanting quotes, other artists wanting to know how I'd done it. But I was watching the door my parents had escaped through, feeling something I hadn't expected, not triumph, but a strange emptiness. The cage was open, but I'd lived in it so long I'd forgotten what flying felt like. Martha Vance appeared beside me again. The buyer would like to meet you, privately, tomorrow, if possible. Who is the buyer? Someone who understands what it's like to have their story written by others, she said cryptically. Someone who believes in the power of reclaiming narrative. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As the crowd finally began to disperse, Ethan showed me his phone again. Lane Heritage Homes' Facebook page was being flooded with comments. Their Google reviews were tanking. Someone had already updated their Wikipedia page to include controversy involving artistic suppression and fraud allegations. You know this changes everything, he said. I thought about Monday morning, 8:30 sharp, the creative consultant position that would never trap me now. The family that had just disowned themselves in front of Riverside Heights' entire arts community. Everything already changed, I replied. The moment they sent that first email in my name. This was just the appraisal. The $250,000 check would clear in 3 days. The first thing I'd do was pay off the student loans I should never have had. The second was to paint whatever the hell I wanted. No garage required. The microphone felt weightless in my hand as I stepped back to the center of the stage. The crowd, which had been dispersing, suddenly froze. Even the waitstaff stopped mid-pour, champagne suspended in crystalline arcs. Before I go, I said, my voice cutting through the residual chatter. There are 3 things that need to be said. Carol and Dennis, who had almost reached the exit, turned back. My mother's face was a masterpiece of contained fury, her lips pressed so tight they'd disappeared. Dennis looked like a man watching his stock portfolio crash in real time. I raised the microphone, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. First, for the past 18 months, someone has been answering emails in my name, telling the art world I'm not ready. I let the words hang in the air like evidence tags. That someone used corporate IP addresses from Lane Heritage Homes. A ripple went through the crowd. The Tribune reporter's fingers flew across her phone screen. Second tonight, appraisals sold for $250,000, proving that my voice was always ready. I looked directly at my parents. The market has spoken, and it said I was worth more than a garage placement. Someone in the crowd whistled appreciatively. Others nodded, understanding the poetry of the reversal. And third, I pulled out the formal letter Paula had prepared, holding it high enough for the cameras to catch. As of this moment, I'm terminating all professional and personal associations with Lane Heritage Homes, effective immediately. The letter was a piece of art itself. Paula had crafted every word to be legally bulletproof and emotionally devastating. I handed it to the event coordinator. Please ensure this reaches Mr. and Mrs. Lane. It includes the formal resignation from a position I never accepted, the revocation of any power of attorney, and a demand for the immediate removal of my name from all company materials and communications. Dennis started pushing back through the crowd, his face purple with rage. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I have. The letter also includes documentation of every email sent without my consent, submitted to the State Labor Board and the Better Business Bureau. Carol's voice cracked like a whip. You're destroying your family. No, I said, surprising myself with how steady I felt. I'm appraising it accurately for the first time. Paula stepped forward, positioning herself between me and my advancing parents. Mr. Lane, I'd advise against any action that could be construed as intimidation or harassment. There are approximately 60 witnesses and at least a dozen recording devices present. The Hawthorne Fair's security had materialized near the stage, ready to intervene if necessary. The head of security, a former cop named Williams, gave me a subtle nod. Mara had prepared for this possibility. Furthermore, I continued, the room now absolutely silent. Lane Heritage Homes might want to review their sponsorship positions carefully. I believe sponsors are held to certain ethical standards regarding fraud and defamation. The event coordinator was already on his phone, probably calling the fair's board of directors. A silver-tier sponsorship was significant, but not significant enough to survive this level of scandal. Martha Vance chose that moment to speak, her voice carrying the authority of old money and older connections. The collector I represent wants it known that any attempt at retaliation against Ms. Lane will be met with considerable legal and financial response. We protect our artists. The threat was velvet-covered but unmistakable. Several other collectors murmured agreement. In the art world, attacking an artist whose work you'd invested in was like burning your own money. Carol made one last attempt, her voice switching to the maternal tone that had controlled me for decades. Avery, sweetheart, you're making a terrible mistake. Without family, I'll have freedom. I finished, which is worth more than any appraisal you could give me. I set the microphone back in its stand with deliberate care. The click it made seemed to echo through the space, a punctuation mark on 29 years of sentences written by others. One final thing, I said, projecting without the microphone now. The remaining pieces in the appraisals series will be exhibited at North Star Gallery next month. You're all invited to see what else was hidden in the garage. Applause erupted, not polite gallery applause, but something raw and genuine. People were actually cheering. Someone shouted, "About fucking time," which earned both gasps and laughter. Dennis tried one more time to approach the stage, but Williams stepped smoothly into his path. "Sir, I think it's time for you to go. This is my event. We're sponsors." The event coordinator ended that delusion quickly. "We're sponsors. I'm afraid we'll be reviewing that relationship immediately. Please leave, or we'll have you escorted out." The last image I had of my parents was them being herded toward the exit by security. Carol's designer heels clicking a furious staccato retreat. Dennis pulling out his phone, undoubtedly to call their lawyer. Around them, phones captured every second of their humiliation. The same devices that would spread it across social media within minutes. Ethan appeared at my side with a glass of real champagne this time. That was fucking magnificent. It was necessary, I corrected, though I took the champagne gratefully. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with action. The Tribune reporter approached, her recorder visible. "Ms. Lane, do you have any comment about your parents' response?" I thought about all the things I could say about the years of gaslighting, the stolen opportunities, the careful, systematic destruction of my dreams. But Paula had coached me well. My art speaks for itself. So does theirs. Short, quotable, and legally safe. As the crowd finally began to genuinely disperse, the weight of what I'd done started to settle. I'd just publicly severed ties with my family in front of Riverside Heights' entire cultural elite. By tomorrow, it would be the talk of every brunch, every board meeting, every gallery opening. But looking at the empty wall where Appraisals No. 1 had hung sold for $250,000 to someone who understood its value, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt like myself. Mara approached with paperwork for the sale. "You know they'll try to spin this. They'll use their connections, their PR machine." "Let them," I said, signing my name, my real name. Not initials on the line. "I've got something they don't have anymore." "What's that?" "The truth. And apparently, it's worth quite a lot." The clock on the wall showed 10:47 p.m. In less than 2 hours, I'd transformed from their controlled daughter into my own person, from garage art to gallery triumph. Monday morning would still come, but it wouldn't find me at Lane Heritage Homes at 8:30 sharp. It would find me in my studio, painting whatever I wanted, worth exactly what the market, not my family, decided. The appraisal was complete, and I'd finally been valued correctly. The signatures were still wet on the sales documents when I walked through the Hawthorne Fair's grand entrance one last time. Behind me, the Cathedral of Commerce and Culture continued its rituals, champagne circles reforming, gossip crystallizing into tomorrow's headlines, my family's reputation dissolving in real time like sugar in rain. The November air hit my face like a baptism. Sharp, clean, mine. My phone buzzed incessantly, messages I didn't need to read, calls I wouldn't answer. The only notification that mattered was from my bank, pending deposit $250,000. By Monday, the student loans would be history. By Tuesday, I'd sign a lease on a real studio, one with northern light and walls that belonged to me. Williams, the security chief, held the door as I passed. Hell of a show in there, Ms. Lane. Just telling the truth. Sometimes that's the best show there is. The valet stand stretched before me, a parade of Mercedes and Teslas and Bentleys. But I walked past them all. My beat-up Honda Civic waited in the self-park section 3 blocks away, humble and honest. As I walked, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been dreaming about for 2 hours. I blocked Carol's number, then Dennis's, then the Lane Heritage Homes main line. Each block was a small death, a necessary amputation. The ghosts of 29 years of manipulation vanished into the digital void. Martha Vance stood beside a Blacktown car near the corner, her window sliding down as I approached. The buyer wanted me to give you this. She handed me a cream envelope, heavy stock, unmarked. And to tell you that courage is its own art form. I tucked the envelope into my jacket without opening it. Some messages deserved privacy, deserved to be read in the safety of my own space, a concept I was just beginning to understand. Who are they? I asked one more time. Martha smiled. Someone who spent 40 years in their own garage. Someone who understands that revenge is just the first draft, success is the final edit. The town car pulled away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk. Around me, Riverside Heights glittered with its false promises and inherited disappointments, but I no longer felt part of its landscape. I was my own geography now. The walk to my car became a meditation. Each step took me further from what the Lanes had built, their careful construction of control and manipulation. My phone showed 37 missed calls from various family numbers, but also something else, 14 messages from galleries wanting to see my work, 3 interview requests from art magazines, and 1 text from Ethan that just said, "You're free." I sat in my Honda for a moment before starting it, looking at my hands. They were still stained with paint from this morning's work on Appraisals No. 2. The piece that would explore the medical records my parents had tried to create, the therapist appointments they'd scheduled to establish my instability. All evidence now, all art soon. The engine turned over on the first try, reliable, unlike family. As I drove through Riverside Heights one last time, I passed the billboard for Lane Heritage Homes. "Building your legacy," it proclaimed, Dennis's confident smile promising stability and success. By morning, someone would have spray-painted it or the company would have it removed. Either way, it would become another artifact, another document of decline. My studio apartment waited, cramped and perfect. The canvases leaned against the wall like soldiers ready for battle. But the war was over. What came next was construction building something from the rubble of what had been demolished. I finally opened Martha's envelope at my kitchen table, under the harsh fluorescent light that had witnessed 3 years of survival shifts and instant noodles. Inside, a single card with embossed letters. "Your parents built you a prison and called it love. Tonight, you sold the blueprints for $250,000. The best revenge isn't just success, it's authenticity. Welcome to the other side of the mirror. A collector who knows." Beneath it, a check for the additional $500,000 for the remaining series. Already signed. Already real. $750,000 total. From garage art to $750,000 in one night. I set up my easel right there in the kitchen, not waiting for the perfect studio or the northern light. The fluorescent bulb would do. It had witnessed the struggle. It deserved to see the victory. As I picked up my brush, I thought about Monday morning at 8:30 sharp, the empty desk at Lane Heritage Homes, the creative consultant position gathering dust like everything else my parents had tried to force on me. Carol and Dennis would sit in their perfect house, surrounded by their perfect things, finally understanding that control is just another word for fear, but I wouldn't be thinking about them. I'd be painting. Each stroke a declaration of independence, each color a choice they couldn't make for me. The garage, Dennis had said, where things go to be forgotten. He was wrong about one thing. Some things that start in garages end up changing the world. Companies, bands, revolutions, and sometimes, just sometimes, daughters who refuse to be appraised by people who never understood their value. I dipped my brush in cerulean blue, the color of midnight skies and possibilities, and made the first mark on the fresh canvas. Behind it lay $250,000 and public vindication. Ahead lay whatever I decided to create. The garage door was finally open, and I'd driven straight through it into the light. My phone buzzed one last time, a Google alert. The headline read, "Unknown Artist A.L. Stuns Hawthorne Fair with record-breaking debut. Exposes family fraud." Unknown artist. I smiled, turning the phone face down. Not unknown anymore. Not silenced. Not managed. Just free. I painted until 4:23 a.m., until my eyes burned and my hands cramped, until the sun threatened the horizon with its own debut. When I finally stepped back, what stared back at me wasn't revenge or rage or even triumph. It was simply me, finally visible, finally real, finally worth exactly what I'd always been priceless. Thank you so much for listening to my story of revenge and redemption. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across continents and time zones. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about family, freedom, and finding your worth. What garage are you ready to drive through your story matters too?